Hello, listeners, dear listeners of mine. Welcome back to another episode of More Than You Think. Well, yes. Woo! Yes. This is going to be episode 2 of More Than You Think, which is WKNC's newest podcast, hosted by me, Valerie, where we go into detail and talk about how pop culture events that are happening or that have happened in the past are related to the political, social, and economic climate. Last episode, I ended the podcast by saying that we were going to talk about Sabrina Carpenter's new album, Man's Best Friend, and the controversy around that. And that I was going to survey some of the students here at NC State about it, which I did. I also said that we were going to dissect a reading that I did for my law ethics class and connect it to pop culture and the entertainment industry, which we will do later. But we're going to start with the Man's Best Friend controversy. And now that the album is out, we can actually talk about whether or not it's problematic. And I'm going to give my personal take on the album itself, like the music and everything, the artistry. So a quick summary about the controversy that started over the summer with this album. Over the summer, Sabrina announced that she was going to be releasing a new album called Man's Best Friend. And the cover of the album is a picture of her on all fours, except she has like her hand up, like pointing at something, but you can't see what she's like gesturing to. And there's like a man in a suit grabbing her by the hair, and it seems like he's kind of dragging her. So a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, this is like really demeaning towards women. This makes us look like pets. Like, this makes us look like we have no control, and it makes us look like men own us. What the heck? Why is Sabrina promoting this kind of stuff? So a good bit of time has passed since the album was released, but it was released August 29th of 2025. And upon its release, Sabrina was interviewed by a bunch of people. And in one interview, she was asked about the controversy around the cover, which she ended up changing. Like, she ended up making alternate covers. But her response to the controversy around the original cover was, number one, it was, you guys need to get outside more. And number two, she said that when she made this cover, she thought it was very obvious that she was the one in control of the situation happening on the cover, which I would like to remind you again is her on the floor on her knees, and the man is grabbing her and pulling her by the hair, which, you know, it's a little confusing. If you see the cover, it looks like she's definitely not in control. There's a man standing above her, she's down, and it looks like she's like sticking her hand up, like begging like a dog. You know what I mean? It just doesn't look like she really has any control. The guy is like messing with her hair also, like messing it up. Like that ticks me off, because she probably worked really hard on her hair, and this guy is freaking tangling it. Like, that bothers me too. Like, she's not in charge of that.
She's got a point.
If you see a picture of a girl on her knees begging like a dog, the automatic assumption is not, oh, she knows what she's up to. I think we are all in agreement. Like, that's a little bit sus among us. Okay. So over the summer, when I saw that cover, I had my doubts about it, but I didn't want to say anything because I thought maybe it was intentionally misleading and it was trying to trick everyone into thinking, Sabrina's doing this whole submissive thing. And then when they listen to the album, maybe we're all going to be like, oh my gosh, she's taking her power back. But guys, I listened to the album the minute it was released. Like midnight, I put my headphones on and I listened to this album because I was curious to see if she was going to do something intelligent. But this album is not a very intelligent album. And that kind of surprised me from her, because her last album, although it wasn't like intellectual Shakespeare freaking philosophy, like nobody's asking for that, but like short and sweet. Most recent album before Man's Best Friend was still pretty witty and fun, and all the songs were like catchy except for like what Sharp as Tool. That one wasn't very catchy, but it wasn't meant to be catchy. That was meant to be like an emotional song, whatever. Short and Sweet was a fun album. It was catchy, and it had some witty lyrics. Like, for example, when she was like, what a surprise, your phone just died, your car drove itself from LA to her thigh. Like, I was gagged when I heard that for the first time. I was like, wait, yes, well, yes. And then this time I wasn't gagged, because here's the thing. Feather was a great song where it not only was catchy, but it was like, I don't really need it. I don't really need this guy. I need to stop worrying about him. I need to stop thinking about him and centering my life around him. And I need to be independent and work on myself and have a good time. And that's like a fun hot girl anthem, hot girl summer type vibe. Whereas this new album, she's dwelling on a man. And I don't know if it's one man, multiple men. Like, I just feel like she fumbled someone really badly. A lot of people get really angry at her, but she kind of reminds me of like that friend that you have that you love her so much, but she keeps finding the worst freaking men on the planet and worshiping them and worshiping the ground they walk on. And we all have that freaking friend, bro. Yeah, Sabrina Carpenter gives me the vibe of being like the Carrie Bradshaw of the friend group. So I asked the students of NC State what they thought about Sabrina Carpenter, and here are the results. I got about 50 responses, and 30% male, 70% female. On a scale of 1 to 10, the average rating for Man's Best Friend was 7.83. The average rating for Short and Sweet was actually lower, 7.3, interestingly enough, because I actually preferred Short and Sweet, and I thought a lot of people did too, but I guess not here at NC State. But North Carolina is a very strange state, especially when you mix everybody up at this huge public university. You get all kinds of people. So I asked people, did you find the album cover offensive? 10% of people said yes. And then I asked people, what do you think about Sabrina Carpenter's brand, about all the criticism around her? And for the most part, I guess it was mostly women answering, but for the most part, people said she's relatable, she's empowering, she can do whatever she wants. There were only a few answers that said that she was like harmful. This one says, I think it can be harmful, but espresso was heat, which is true. Like, espresso was heat, guys. The students at NC State might not have had too much to say about this album, but obviously I spend a lot of time on freaking Stan Twitter and TikTok, and it looks like the general public, like people who are more into pop culture, definitely didn't really like this album. They found it boring, they found it sort of lazy, and they didn't think it was well written. I thought that the production, like the music, the instrumental portion of the album, I thought that was great, especially in like Tears. If you actually go through and read the lyrics, throughout the album, there are many mentions of like a man that she was seeing or dating or whatever. And like he starts to like lock in or something, like he's going monk mode or something, like not wanting to touch her, not wanting to hang out with her. And I just feel like if I was Sabrina dang Carpenter, one of the biggest stars, most successful women on the planet right now, very highly desired girl, right? Like what the heck are you doing begging for a man? Why are you begging a man to be with you? Wake up. I wish I could slap, 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 slap. Literally, get up, get off the ground. You are Sabrina Carpenter. Hello. I know you were on Girl Meets World for a minute there, but that doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter that you were on that show that ended the streak of good Disney Channel shows. It's okay that you were on that show. That's over, and now you're a global superstar. Stop valuing yourself based off of what men think of you. And stop advertising that. Sabrina Carpenter is a huge star who gets advertised to everyone. Like, she's huge. She's everywhere. Not to mention the fact also that it's scientifically proven that the music you listen to on a daily basis can impact your mental health, and it can like alter your subconscious. So if you keep listening to like male-centered music where it's this girl crying and crying and crying, literally she says in this album, Man's Best Friend, that she's crying over a man, drinking too much because of him, she's wishing bad things on him, like she's obsessed with this man that she either fumbled or who just has broken her heart. And not to say that you can't be sad over a heartbreak, but then you name the album Man's Best Friend and make yourself look like a dog.
Oh, that's no. In the sense that...
And now women are under the impression that you, Sabrina Carpenter, probably one of the most powerful women in the music industry right now, ends up actually not being powerful at all, and that you can easily be like destroyed over a man. A man. And then she goes on this interview and she's like, well, I think that this album obviously shows how in control I am, when that's not the case at all. And it's like, sis, We love you and we know you can do better, but this is so tone deaf, especially right now. Like, don't even joke about this, lad. Don't even joke about women's rights right now, lad, because there are groups of right-wing men that are actively trying to get rid of women's rights. I'm not even joking. There are fascist groups of right-wing extremists who are actively trying to get rid of women's right to vote. This is not me kidding. I'm actually being serious. So making an album where a woman is shown being dragged by her hair on her hands and knees and comparing herself to a dog, saying that she's man's best friend, basically saying, yeah, like advertising to the world, like, yeah, us women, we'll do anything you guys say, and we only care about men. At this moment in time, at any moment in time, I don't even understand why anyone would do that ever. But girl, this wasn't the move. I'm sorry. This wasn't the move. And actually, you know what? I'm not sorry, because that's just true. And Sabrina Carpenter is someone who could do so much better, because the album Emails I Can't Send was great. It wasn't male-centered. It was just fun and awesome and cool, and it had substance, whereas this album didn't really have substance, unfortunately. But that also could have been a consequence of like the very short period of time it took to make this album. Like, it was possibly rushed or something like that. So hopefully she puts a little more thought into the next one, not just lyrically, but also like socially, you know? So yeah, the Sabrina Carpenter album was a bad move on her part because it makes women look like we are just trying to appease men at a time where men are trying to get rid of our rights because of the current president making right-wing extremist men feel empowered. Yes, everything matters. Everything matters, okay? But I am a Sabrina Carpenter fan, and like, this disappointed me a lot. I still like her. I just feel disappointed, you know? Like when your mom's like, no, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed because I know you can do better. You know, like I know she can do better. And hopefully next time is better. But let's move on. That concludes that. And now we're going to move on to the next topic, which is the reading that I did for my law ethics class, which is called What Will Future Generations Condemn Us For? By Kwame Anthony Appiah, who is an English philosopher, American English philosopher. I also want to mention that in the last episode of this podcast, I said aPebble instead of Appiah. It's pronounced Appiah, so I guess I wasn't listening that well in class. But from now on, we're going to pronounce it correctly. It's Appiah. His name is Kwame Anthony Appiah. And basically this selection, this reading that we were given for our class, it goes over slavery and other practices that were considered normal a long time ago that now obviously we look back on and we're like, what the frick? Appiah argues that there are three main signs that you should look out for if you think a practice today will be condemned in the future. And the signs are, number one, that there are already arguments against it. Number two, people who defend it invoke tradition or other like non-moral arguments. So, for example, like back in the day, if you said, well, slavery is bad, you're like torturing people and like killing people, like that's not good. And then somebody would say like, well, that's the way we've always done it. It's tradition. Like that's not a valid argument, right? Like, that's sign number two. And number three is strategic ignorance or like purposeful ignorance. So people who are for the practice or in favor of the practice, they do their best to ignore arguments against it in order for them to be able to say that they didn't know, you know, so that they can't seem like bad people. But obviously, it's still morally wrong if you're being ignorant on purpose. Sign number three, strategic ignorance or purposeful ignorance. So I'm going to list three pop culture practices that by Appiah standards probably be looked back on in the future with condemnation. Starting with number one, child actors. I don't know if you guys have seen the Nickelodeon documentary about Dan Schneider, but gosh, that was terrible. And the treatment of child actors and child stars in general, also like singers and dancers, it's been something that's been pretty hard to hide from the public because of the way that these kids turn out when they're older. Like they go crazy. Like we know right now Britney Spears or like Shia LaBeouf, these people had very public crash outs and very public controversies that probably resulted from their psyche getting messed up when they were kids. And it's just strange how consistently it's child actors that end up like this. It's like one after the other. A bunch of kids from Disney Channel as well as Nickelodeon, and like in the 90s and 80s. For example, also Amanda Bynes. Like a lot of these child stars end up with a lot of mental health problems. And then of course there's the Disney Channel trifecta. Miley Cyrus, Demi Lovato, and Selena Gomez all dealt with depression, anxiety, addictions, and stuff like that after being on Disney Channel, or maybe towards the end of being on Disney Channel. I'm not exactly sure, but they all came out of Disney Channel with like severe mental health struggles. Lindsay Lohan is another example of somebody who, she was extremely famous in the 2000s, like one of the biggest stars on the planet. And then, she had to go to rehab several times. And like, to make matters even worse, they plastered her entire personal life everywhere and made all of her problems public. In retrospect, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal because she's doing so much better now. And at the very least, we can say that she sets a good example for anyone who goes through similar struggles. But I mean, can you imagine going through all that, being so famous, probably going to a bunch of parties, ending up with some addictions, and now everyone hates you because you're a terrible example for their children that grew up watching you? That's not fair. And she was so young. An earlier example from a longer time ago is Macaulay Culkin, of course, the star of the first 2 Home Alone movies, which are like the best Christmas movies ever. Yes, every single Christmas. Yes, absolutely. But unfortunately, this guy, he became so freaking famous as a little kid, like freaking 10 years old. And yeah, he experienced a lot of substance abuse issues also, depression, things like that. And like everybody knows about that, right? So yeah, being a child star, being that famous as a kid is probably not very healthy. And back to the reading, there are already a lot of arguments against child acting. Is it even ethical? Like, should there even be child actors at all? A lot of people say no. And I've never heard anybody defending child acting. I think everyone's kind of against it. But the problem is like the treatment of child actors, especially a lot of the time by their parents, has been pretty traumatizing for them. For a lot of these kids, it's the parents forcing them into this position, saying that my baby's going to be a star and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make you a star. And then they force their kids, they overwork their kids, and they abuse their kids. The second thing that I think applies to this reading that people will look back on with disgust, hopefully, is the beauty standards. And I want to say mostly the beauty standards for women, but it's actually for both women and men. There's this standard in Hollywood that all of the stars have to fit. Number one, there are already arguments against it. Obviously, you'll see discourse online on the news about how unhealthy it is for people to look up to models and singers, because a lot of these people have eating disorders, and that's why they're so skinny and they look so quote unquote healthy and good. And I've had plenty of friends who have had eating disorders. I've known plenty of girls who have had eating disorders because they wanted to be skinny and they wanted to look pretty. So it's unhealthy. There are arguments against it. And the second sign is that defenders invoke tradition or other non-moral argument. And yes, when I hear people defending a beauty standard, it's always, well, there have always been beauty standards, or that's just the way biology works. It's the reason that this is the beauty standard is because it's probably the most biologically healthy and people find healthy traits attractive for reproduction, whatever. But if you're too skinny, you're unhealthy. Or if you don't have enough body fat, that's actually unhealthy. If you don't have a little flabbity flap, you might die if you get the flu. I'm not even joking. I don't know if any of you have seen Parks and Recreation, but there's this episode where Chris, played by Rob Lowe, this character he plays, he's like extremely fit and he has like a super low body fat percentage, and he gets hit with a cold and he almost dies. And that's true. If you don't have enough body fat, your body will not be able to protect you from like the simplest of viruses. So yeah, that's not biologically healthy. And for reproduction, that's not good. Also, if you're a woman and you are too skinny, you can't have kids anymore. So the reproduction argument is not even a valid argument. Like it's just scientifically wrong. And then finally, strategic ignorance. Well, yes. Yes. Like, well, yes. Like people pretend that they didn't know that being too skinny can kill you. The frick? For men, it's like you have to look like somewhere in between John Cena and Timothy Chalamet. The point is, like, nobody's allowed to have any body fat anymore. Like, obviously, Timothée Chalamet, that's a man with no body fat. I hope he never gets a cold. And then, like, John Cena, super muscular, big guy. Like, by the way, Peacemaker, literally the best show ever. Love it so much. But anyways, I digress. There's a beauty standard for everyone, even men. And especially as people start getting older, there's like more pressure on them to stay young, which is why, like, for example, Kris Jenner, she's had like a facelift recently that it's left people speechless because she looks really good. And then a lot of younger women, celebrities, are getting Botox and fillers at an earlier age to prevent aging later on. There's already discourse about that, and I think in the future there will hopefully be a solution, or we'll just learn to love ourselves even as we age, hopefully. And people will look back on that and question like why we ever did that in the first place. Or it'll get worse. Maybe it'll even get worse, and maybe they will find out better ways to keep ourselves young, and we'll just keep making it crazier and crazier. And by 100 years from now, everyone will look 20 forever, which actually seems kind of chill. I'm not even going to lie. Like, that actually seems kind of awesome. The third practice that I thought fit these standards was AI in art. Obviously, people kind of hate AI stuff already. And when I hear people trying to defend AI art, usually their defense is like, well, it makes it easier for me to make my art. Girl, what? Like, okay. But it's not that it's making it easier. It's that it's doing it for you, you know? As for the strategic ignorance, I think a lot of people are strategically ignorant about AI because not only does it like suppress your creativity and your critical thinking skills, but it's also bad for the environment. Womp womp. Yeah, sorry. I did really love when ChatGPT first came out. I was like, wow, I'm never going to have to do anything in my life ever again. I'm so excited. But then I found out it was bad for the environment. Shouts out ChatGPT. Try not to use ChatGPT or any other AI unless you really have to, because it's also bad for your brain if you don't think. If you don't use your brain is a muscle, and if you don't use it, it'll get weaker. Whatever. Lame. Okay. But it's important to think about these things because the more we think about it now, the quicker you can prevent it from causing damage in your society, right? So hopefully, if anyone is listening to this podcast, feel free to talk about these things with your friends, because spreading awareness, being socially aware, politically aware, practicing morality, it's good for society, even if it's just in a pop culture context, which is what we do on this podcast, More Than You Think. Well, yes, woo! Which I am going to conclude now. But in the next episode, I'm going to talk about how the show The Summer I Turned Pretty relates to the declining birth rate in America. What? You might be thinking, Valerie, that doesn't make any freaking sense. Well, actually it does, and I'm going to explain it next time. And you're going to be like, dang, that's true, white woman. Okay. And then I'm doing another survey. So if you see QR codes around the school, scan them with your phone. Scan them with your phone. It's going to be just a survey on like what kind of pop culture and music, movies, shows, video games that the students here at NC State enjoy. And we're going to dissect that, and we're going to see how diverse this school actually is. Okay? Love you. I love you to my 1 or 2 listeners, if even that. I love you guys. Aw. Yes, and you love me. Because if you didn't, you wouldn't have made it to the end of the dang podcast, but you're here. Okay, I love you. I am done with this episode. Tune in next week. Yes. Tune in next week or else. Well, yes. Okay. Love you. Bye.